Today on CityCast Houston, welcome to 2025. To kick off the new year, we're making some bold predictions and filling out our bingo cards for what's ahead in H-Town. Joining me are conservative commentator Charles Blain and education activist and attorney Monica Flores Richart. So get those bingo cards ready because we're going to be filling them out with things like Beyonce in concert to the Texas legislative session, wild weather because we're in H-Town, so that might be your free space, the state takeover of HISD, and of course, President Trump. Here's what 2025 could have in store for us in Houston. It's Friday, January 3rd. I'm Raheel Ramzanali, and here's what Houston's talking about. Happy New Year, everyone. Monica, Charles, welcome in. How's everybody doing?
Great. Happy New Year. I am excited about this year. How about y'all?
I'm so excited. How about you, Charles? Are you excited about 2025?
I am very excited about 2025. It was a good end to 2024, and I'm excited to see what the future holds.
Now, before we jump into the political side and the heavy news that we're going to talk about, I do want to take a minute here and send our condolences to everyone who lost a loved one or suffered from the attack in New Orleans on New Year's. You know, Texas and Louisiana, we're close. We're basically cousins. And sadly, there is a Houston connection with this incident. And the suspect who drove into the crowd on Bourbon Street was born in Texas and lived in the greater Houston area. And, you know, we did see the news that the FBI believes that the suspect, Shamsud Din-Jabbar, acted alone. And the FBI is investigating the attack as an act of terrorism. Federal agents also searched a property in North Harris County, but as of this recording, they did not make any more arrests. And if you want to help out victims of the attack, by the way, please check out the list of resources linked in our show notes. And again, we are thinking about everyone that was impacted from this act of terror. And just know that we love New Orleans and we're thinking about y'all.
Absolutely.
Yeah, certainly.
I want to open things up with what's on your bingo card for Houston when it comes to pop culture, right? We've got things like Beyonce fans who are convinced that she's going to go on tour after she performed on Netflix. We've got the Houston Rodeo coming up here pretty soon. A lot of fun stuff, but what's on your pop culture bingo card for Houston, Monica?
You know, I think that the rodeo is going to be incredible. It's something that my family enjoys all the time, and I look forward to eating fresh new things at the rodeo. I predict that I'm going to eat something that's, different. You know, we have such a wonderful culinary scene in Houston that's often reflected in the rodeo. So really looking forward to that.
How about you, Charles?
Well, I'm going to take both of what you just said and predict that Beyonce is going to be the one to close out the rodeo because I feel like everything is just aligning too perfectly and it would make sense. And where she performed on Christmas Day is where she would be performing for the rodeo. So maybe it was practice. We'll see what happens.
Wow, that is a big one on the bingo card. I'm going to throw one out here for my bingo card, and that is to meet somebody with the new 621 area code, which, by the way, if you don't know, that is going to be our new area code, which has launched officially. And I want to judge them, by the way. Like a 621er, I'm like, what are you, a 621er? That's so weird, okay? Coming from an 832er, okay? So, yeah, I want to meet somebody with that for sure.
Yeah, when you get a call from a 713, it definitely, perks you up a little bit versus an 832.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if they have that new 621 area code, their bags must not be unpacked yet. They're too fresh here, so they can't even call themselves a Houstonian.
Yeah, definitely. They are new to the city, but hey, we welcome everyone. And let's start with our official bingo card for the city of Houston for 2025. Now, one of the biggest stories, y'all, was HISD, and we saw the continued changes from the state takeover. There was major distrust where voters rejected a historic school bond in the November election. And now the district's budget deficit is getting even bigger by another $125 million, which brings the total deficit to $250 million right now. So what do you have on your bingo card for HISD this year? Monica?
I think a couple things that I am personally looking for. I'm looking to see if they're going to try to float another bond early this year. Maybe in May for the May uniform election date, kind of looking out for that. But I think that a lot of work really needs to be done to repair the relationship with the community. The way the Superintendent Miles was put into power is kind of anti everything we know about organization, about trust, about building trust with the community and everything. There was really no input from the community on so many of these levers kind of that were pulled to actually get him into power. So I think that we're seeing some of the board of managers stepping up and trying to reach out to the community. And that has a direct influence on, I think, enrollment, and because those enrollment numbers are important because that's how the money flows in. So building that trust again with the community, it's not only about the protests that happen, it's about real numbers like enrollment. So I'm really looking to see if we see some of these board of managers break out and really try to build these relationships back with the community.
Yeah, that's going to be really important for HISD to build that trust back up. And it starts with Mike Miles and, of course, the board of managers, as you mentioned. How about you, Charles?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much everything Monica just said. I think when we saw the bond in November go down, shortly thereafter, the board of managers came out and said that they were going to start more community meetings, more community engagement sessions, really trying to build that trust. Obviously that was the end of November. We're heading into the holiday season, so it's difficult to do that. So I'm really curious to see at the start of the year how much they actually do that, how serious they are about building those relationships. And then similarly what Monica said about this bond election, because if they needed it then presumably they still believe they need it now. Will they come back for a May's pared down election with maybe one or two propositions that are a fraction of the cost of the initial? Are they going to prioritize certain campuses? What does that look like? And what does the effort of building out a new bond proposition looks like? Because again, back to the community aspect with the first one, there really wasn't a ton of community involvement in it until after the fact. And so I'm curious to see how they prioritize community going forward, because if they don't, they're going to continue to hit these speed bumps along the way. And that's with the board and with the superintendent.
Yeah, and there's so many layers to unpack with the potential new bond proposal if they do that, right? Like where they're going to get the money to fund all of the research again, or where they're going to get the money to do all of the things that are needed with this bond, right? The second part, will Mike Miles be front and center and admit that maybe he lost some trust with the community, right? Because it starts with him. The board of managers, you can say anything you want, you can do your own outreach. But unfortunately, the face of the state takeover is who? Mike Miles. And there have been no signs, at least that I've seen, where Mike Miles has admitted that, yeah, some of this is my fault, the way I've handled things, right? Will he be the one coming up and saying, all right, let's start again? So that's on my bingo card. Like, will Mike Miles do that?
And yeah, and I have to say, I'm curious that too, because when we saw the bond go down, immediately thereafter, he put out a letter that was kind of more accusatory in tone than it was, saying, hey, we had an issue and this is the issue we're going to address going forward. So yeah, very curious to see if that perspective changes, if there was kind of maybe a reevaluation over the holiday season where he's going to approach it differently in 2025.
His management style has been consistently, I am leading, in some other administrations, we have seen a lot more from the board president, a lot more, kind of leadership interviews, media, things like that from members of the board of managers. So I think it's going to be interesting. I don't think that's consistent with his management style to kind of make these huge admissions and move on. I don't think that was the case in Dallas really when he was there, but it'll be really interesting to see. You might see some fractures with the board of managers as well, if there is kind of, in fact, a difference in how kind of to interact with the community.
Yeah, great point right there. Another big story from 2024 was obviously Mayor John Whitmire, Houston's new mayor. He's been in office now for a year. And by the way, on Monday, we're going to have an entire episode about his wins and misses in office. But I want to know what's on your bingo card for Mayor Whitmire and City Hall for 2025. Charles, you start this one.
Yeah, I mean, so much. I think a couple of things. We have the legislative session, which starts in just 2 weeks. And so, how he has sold himself leading up to taking office and since taking office as being kind of the broker that we would need in Austin because of all the relationships he has. So it'll be interesting to see how Houston benefits this upcoming legislative session. And almost more than how it benefits, if the state legislature kind of directs its anger towards Houston and Harris County in the way that it has in the past, or is that going to be a little bit more minimized now that he is head at city council? So we'll see if that actually proves to be true. I think something else that I'll be looking at is he's made a lot of news over this Ernst & Young study that the city is doing to provide a lot of efficiencies and cost reductions, which was also part of why he avoided a tax increase or tax rate increase last year. And so it'll be interesting to see what savings those produce, what efficiencies in governments those produce, and then if city council, if the will is there to actually pursue those things when they come out, because if not, we are looking at a tax increase in 2025 because there's going to be a growing deficit at the city as well.
All right, that's going to be a major one to look out for. What about you, Monica? What is on your bingo card for 2025 when it comes to Mayor Whitmire and City Hall?
I think what's really, I really want to look at is the relationship between him and the county judge. That is really critical for any sort of natural disaster. I have so much hope for him. And I see these unforced errors constantly, talking about Judge Hidalgo's mental health and, her potential for running in the future, calling her fiance a nerd, just all of these things. I just want to tighten up. And I really want that to be a great relationship because, he had a lot of Latino support when he came into office. Obviously, Judge Hidalgo does. I think there's some real potential to do some really great things in this community if they're able to work together well to kind of minimize the real destruction of underserved communities that happens during natural disasters. And I really have a lot of hope for that relationship. So I'm really hoping that kind of works itself out and we're able to have kind of a strong both heads of government. That would be wonderful.
That was on my bingo card, is that Mayor Whitmire and Judge Hidalgo host a press conference together. And they actually, hash things out and we're okay. It's almost like a Heal the World concert, right? Like they come together, they join forces and they say the past is the past and we're looking to the future. And then I hope somebody takes away Mayor Whitmire's social media as well, because we don't need any more comments on pictures, calling people nerd and all this stuff at all.
But it's interesting. I've worked with congressional candidates before and been a staffer, and I've been the one sitting off camera going, "Oh, did he just say that? Why did he say that?" That sort of thing is really kind of stressful. But yeah, I have a lot of hope for the future for them.
Yeah, as do I, and I'm hoping that we need that. We're a big region. We have natural disasters almost every few weeks. And so it's important for the two of them to come together and I think work together. And unfortunately, what we saw last year, I think it was the press conference surrounding the Kingwood flooding when there was kind of the spat that they had. I don't know that produced much confidence in with the general public in terms of them working together. And so I'm hoping we see some improvement there in 2025.
Charles, you just brought up the Texas legislative session, which is going to start in just a couple of weeks, by the way. What's on your bingo card for lawmakers in Austin?
Yeah, I mean, school choice has been the big one. That's guided a lot of the primary fights during both the Republican and Democratic primaries from at least the conservative influence in them. And then the conversation since then, and it's even playing a role in the speaker's race. And so I think it's going to be school choice. And then that has that local component too, because I think that plays a big role into what we see with HISD and enrollment there. And so that's the big one. And then whatever happens with this speaker's race has been a contentious one that I think a lot of folks thought would die down a little bit over the holiday season. It didn't, dueling open letters and signing names to this letter and that letter just kept going back and forth. And I think it's just aggravated the grassroots a lot. And I think people are paying more attention to it than they have in the past. And so that's going to be really interesting to see what happens with that as well.
Charles, recap that for listeners who don't know what's happening, please.
Well, last primary, Speaker Dade Phelan was challenged, and he had a tough challenge, but he came out on top. But in that, he came out wounded and lost some support for his Speaker reelection bid. And while the idea was that he was going to go back in and kind of cobble together a coalition, that's hard to fall apart. And so other people announced, State Representative Tom Oliverson from our region announced he has since dropped out. Fast forward to a Republican caucus meeting where they came out with majority of the Republican caucus members choosing a speaker candidate named David Cook. He's a state representative. And then you had a whole faction that decided they wanted to go with someone else who is chairman or state representative Dustin Burrows. And right now it's looking like the Burrows campaign or the camp is trying to cobble together somewhat of a fill-in or even a Speaker Bonin coalition with some Democrat support and some Republican support, whereas David Cook has the majority of the Republican caucus support. And a lot of people are being threatened because Republican bylaws say that Republican caucus members have have to vote for the caucus candidate. And so the ones who are siding with Burrows are being threatened with primaries. There's mailers going out. There is robocalls, robotexts. I mean, it's almost as if we're in the middle of a primary season right now. And so that's going to be an interesting vote when it comes up.
Man, that is so interesting. The threat of primaries has been used in this. It's been used in school choice, which, by the way, if you don't know what school choice is or vouchers, it's basically taking public tax dollars and subsidizing private school tuition. That's something that Governor Abbott has been pushing for a while, even though a lot of Texans don't want this, whether it be, Texans or lawmakers. They just don't want this, but it is something that has been used to push people out of office. And Governor Abbott is set on getting this thing done. So that's going to be definitely one to watch out for this year. How about you, Monica? What's on your bingo card for the session?
I'm going to have to just parrot Charles. It's going to have to be school choice, but and not just school choice, but also school funding, which was so connected to school choice this past session. That's going to be critical. I mean, we've got to give our students the tools to navigate the future, and we're just not doing it. Our funding is not at the level that it really needs to be. School choice is such a complex issue for our rural communities because there is no choice in a lot of situations, but also a lot of times the biggest employer is the school district, unfortunately. But who knows? I mean, the Democrats have really gotten behind Gene Wu, who was elected to head, I believe, the Democratic caucus in the House, and he's a strong voice. He is somebody who's going to speak a lot and not back down and challenge folks, and super smart. So it's going to be kind of something to really look at, both the school choice part and the education funding part.
Yep, those are going to be interesting things to watch out for. Now, we have a lot of local officials taking office here in Houston this month as well. So I want to get some quick takes on what's on your bingo card for local officials who are going to be taking office and what they might actually accomplish. Monica, you kick this one off.
Oh, goodness. We have some changes in the judicial seats. That's going to be interesting to see. I think there's always kind of a ramp up when you're a new judge to see where we are in terms of backlog and that sort of thing. And then we have some new state reps. Representative Charlene Ward Johnson is a colleague of mine at HCC, and she's taking over in the legislature. And that's going to be really, really good. I mean, it's a heavily Democratic district, so you're going to see a lot of the same, votes and kind of positions. But that's going to be really interesting. I'm also very, very interested in the DA, our new DA that's taking over, Shantir. When Og came in, there was a huge transition. A lot of people left. There's always you lose so much institutional knowledge when you have these transitions, and there's always kind of the potential for hiccups. But he appears to be a strong leader with a lot of support. So I'm really looking forward to the changes that we might see kind of coming out of the DA's office.
Yeah. And by the way, if you want to hear about all the changes that Shantir has planned, we had a sit-down interview with him on CityCast Houston. I've linked that episode in our show notes, and he went into a lot of detail. So if you want to learn more about that, please listen to that episode. How about you, Charles? What do you have on your bingo card for local officials?
Well, definitely the judiciary. I think the district courts, but even I think more importantly or more interestingly for me were the courts of appeals, and to see a lot of the wins there. And we see some really interesting new justices. One that sticks out is a justice by the name of Susanna Dockupil. She has an incredible resume, really interesting candidate. I met her years ago through kind of the criminal justice reform movement. And so it'll be interesting to see kind of how those types of approaches in those seats. But then, like Monica said, the district attorney's race, I think from a conservative perspective, a lot of conservatives saw Shantir running in the primary to the left of Kim Ogg, and the whole kind of narrative with the support of Judge Hidalgo and Commissioner Rodney Ellis, that he was a more progressive candidate. And then since then, it seems as though, at least through rhetoric and conversation, that he has kind of moved more towards a middle ground. And so it'll be interesting to see if that's how the DA's office is going to be managed moving forward. I know he wants to redo the intake, which was a constant complaint among some for the previous administration. So we'll just see. I'm excited for Harris County because it feels as though people are engaged more than they have been in a long time. This most recent election, even though we didn't necessarily break records, people were very engaged, and I feel like that remains. And so I'm hoping that we can stay engaged and hold our elected officials accountable, because regardless of who gets in there, they still have to be held accountable at the end of the day. So I'm excited about that level of engagement remaining as high as it is.
That's a great point right there. You brought up Kim Ogg, the former DA. What do you think happens with Kim Ogg and her future in politics? Is there maybe some kind of appointment by Donald Trump? Is it working with Senator Ted Cruz? What do you think, Charles?
I don't know. I think it's all on the table. I think, when you look at the U.S. attorney's seats, they get appointed by the president with assistance from the senators. And so there's that. There's, the federal judiciary. There's we create new state courts all the time where Governor Abbott appoints people. So I do think that the shift that we saw towards the end of her term post-primary was really interesting and timely. And I think that might pay off in the future.
Yeah, definitely something there. What about you, Monica? Any thoughts on that?
No, I agree. The judicials kind of come from the senators, and her support of Ted Cruz, I think, was kind of critical in that. Right when I saw that, I was thinking she might be angling for a federal bench, or at least have the opportunity for a federal bench. So it'll be interesting to see if that ends up happening.
Speaking of Trump now, he will be starting his second term as president of the United States in just a few weeks. We've already talked about President Trump's second presidency and how it's going to impact the city of Houston and Texas overall. And I've linked that in our show notes as well. But I want to hear from y'all. What is on your bingo card for Trump 2.0, Monica?
Immigration is going to be just massive. And, kind of the threat of tariffs. I'm worry a lot about our Mexican immigrants who are so critical to our construction industry and our agriculture. And in Houston in particular, with our restaurant industry. I mean, we are a city that likes to go out to eat. And so many people behind the scenes are immigrants. Also with the new Sheinbaum presidency in Mexico, who has a very kind of welcoming attitude to come back, to any of the immigrants that might be returning to Mexico. I've seen it actually in my kids' school where, I really feel like a lot of Latinos are going to be going to Latin America for the holidays and just not returning. So I think it's going to be really important to see the moves coming from the Trump administration at the outset. And I think that's just going to have massive, massive impacts on construction and our food supply, the agriculture industry, and, keeping an eye on Sheinbaum as well. I feel like the more welcoming Mexico is to the returning immigrants, that it might kind of cushion the blow and lead to an even stronger exodus back to Mexico.
That'd be interesting to watch for sure. How about you, Charles?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing that comes to mind is Houston's new direct connection to Italy. We know that Tillman Fertitta was nominated to be the ambassador to Italy, so that's interesting. I'm curious to see what other Houstonians, whether it's some of the members of Congress or just other high-profile and prominent people, are pulled into the administration, if any. So I'm curious to watch and see what happens there. But yeah, like Monica said, I think immigration is chief among the issues I'm going to be watching. I mean, we're in Houston, we're in Texas, so this is something that we deal with from every one of our public systems on a regular basis. We always hear it in the news, and it's an issue that motivated folks in November and that the president campaigned heavily on. And so I'm curious to see what the solution is, what they come up with, because we've flipped back and forth with the federal government from Republican and Democrat for years and years and years, and everyone talks about wanting to address the immigration issue, and no one ever really does. And so it'll be interesting to see what solutions come out of this administration.
Charles, I'm curious to get your perspective on this. We've seen internal riffing, fighting. I don't know if fighting is the right word, between Republicans and the MAGA movement regarding H-1B visas. What are your thoughts on that and what's happening right now in the party?
Yeah, well, really the latest or the prevailing narrative among a lot of conservative grassroots is to limit immigration. And some would love it to see zero. Some would love it to see close to zero. We saw Elon and Vivek Ramaswamy came out in support of H-1B visas after previously opposing them. It caused this rift because a lot of people were saying that they were looking at expanding H-1B visas simply to benefit their businesses and bringing in low-cost labor at the expense of Americans. They argue that, well, well, Americans aren't taking a lot of these jobs anyway. Let's import folks who are high quality, who are willing to work. And so you have this rift here. And I think it's going to maintain, because you have to remember that a large part of this base are folks who are underemployed, whether they're living in the Rust Belt or, quote unquote, flyover country, who do look at this and feel as though that could be their job, but for someone taking it. Whether that is the truth or not, that is how a lot of people feel. And that is a narrative that's within the party. And so because of that, I think you're going to continue to see this misalignment on that issue.
Charles, how's the business community receiving this or responding to what's happening right now with the visas?
The party has long embraced the business community. And then there was this shift where they started seeing the business community as establishment and pulling away from them. So you have the activists on one side and the business community on the other. And I think leading into this election, the tech community became that new age business community for Republicans, and they glommed on and it got really excited. And that worked while interests were aligned. And then when those interests get unaligned again, because that tech community is more concerned with the issues at hand for them and not necessarily underlying conservative principles, they're going to see that split again. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing here. And I don't think this is the last time we're going to see it. I believe it will be with a lot of other issues when the tech community, which does have a solid foothold in this administration, really kind of flexes its muscle on policy that they think would best benefit them, and it's not aligned with the conservative grassroots. And so I think this is the first instance of it. We're not even past Inauguration Day yet, so there are going to be a lot of others.
All right, one more thing to fill out our bingo card for 2025, and we have to end with weather. Now, Houston weather can be wild, and we had some pretty crazy weather last year with the derecho, Hurricane Beryl. Now, I don't know if y'all want to predict hurricane season or anything else, but what's on your bingo card for Houston weather in 2025? Monica, you kick it off.
Raheel, I'm just trying to get through this polar vortex that's supposed to be coming through in the next couple of weeks. I mean, we are not prepared for cold. We're prepared for heat and to some extent prepared for hurricanes. But man, we are not prepared for cold, and especially the electricity grid, seeing what's going to happen there. The latest I've heard is that it's not going to freeze as hard down here, but what's happening in the rest of the state has such a direct impact on our grid. Yeah. That's going to be really, really important. So I want to get through this cold snap. I think we're probably going to see the same threats that we do, but I think we just have to be ready. We just have to be Houston in a constant state of readiness. Water, ready to fill up your tub, fireplace going, whatever it takes. It's crazy. I think about the world that my children are growing up in. It's so different than the world that I grew up in with all of these natural disasters.
How about you, Charles?
I predict a hot summer. That's what I predict.
Yeah. It's going to be a hot summer.
That's probably the only safe prediction when it comes to Houston weather is a hot summer. So I'll predict that. But like Monica said, I mean, people just need to be prepared for whatever it is, whether it's a tornado, a hurricane, a derecho, a flood, a drought, like it's whatever it is. We just need to be prepared for it because Houston's going to experience it.
Yeah. I'm curious to see what the homeowners insurance crisis looks like after one more year, right? If there is another hot summer, if there's another hurricane, if there's a derecho, tornadoes, everything you just mentioned, will more companies pull out like they've already done here in the last year or so and have a direct impact on us, the citizens of the city and surrounding areas. All right, there's a lot on our bingo cards, and I want to know what's on your bingo card as well if you're listening. So please send us a DM on Instagram at CityCastHouston and let us know what is on your bingo card for the city in 2025. Charles, Monica, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for filling out those bingo cards with us.
Thank you. Happy New Year.
Thank you for having us. Really appreciate it. Happy New Year.
That was Charles Blain of the Urban Reform Institute and Monica Flores Richart, who is on the Board of Trustees for Houston Community College. All the stories we discussed are linked in our show notes. Hey, help us start the year off with a bang by sharing this episode with 3 friends who live in the greater Houston area. Word of mouth is really the best way to connect more people to CityCast Houston. So please share. And also subscribe to CityCast Houston if you're new here and drop us a rating and review. Thank you. That will do it for this week here on CityCast Houston. Our producers this week were Laura Satsui, Lizzie Goldsmith, and Carleon Jones. Our newsletter editor is Brooke Lewis. Our executive producer is Laura Isensee. And I'm your host, Raheel Ramzanali. Our music is by the band All the Kimonos. We'll be back on Monday with a deep dive into Mayor John Whitmire's first year leading Houston and what we're watching for from his office in 2025. Thank you for listening, and I hope you learned something new. And Monica Flores Richart. Did I say it right? Richart. I did. Yeah. Woo. I got it. Okay.